Please welcome to the stage moderator Laurie Durante, Managing Director, Head of Platform Strategy and Senior Relationship Manager, FS Investments, and Sarano Kelley, co-founder, the Kelley Group.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laurie Durante. I am Head of Platform Strategy and Senior Relationship Manager at FS Investments. First, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to RJ and Liz for putting on this fantastic event. Decorations are amazing. And a huge congratulations to all of you. Thank you all for being here. Congratulations. I feel so inspired and honored, really, to be here with all of you. And a huge honor, of course, to be with Sarano. So for those of you that don't know, Sarano is a top performance coach in the financial services industry. He talks about a variety of different communications topics. Today, we're going to be focusing on the art of authentic communication. So before we get started, though, I just want to give you guys a quick overview, introduction to FS Investments. So we are a $80 billion alternative asset manager. We focus on a variety of different alternative products and strategies. We cover private credit, liquid alternatives, real estate, and our newest strategy, private equity, through our merger with Portfolio Advisors. I have my two colleagues here with me, our CIO of Portfolio Advisors, Liz Campbell, and Kirsten Pickens, our co-head of U.S. distribution, who many of you know as well. So I think let's get started. So Sarano, let's kick it off.
Okay.
Do you want to introduce yourself and let the group know what they can expect out of today's session?
So the subject is authentic communication. And I want to acknowledge that this was first designed when I was asked to deliver it for Women in Wealth in New York City. To kick it off authentically, I'm actually nervous, which you wouldn't think, right? You're like, dude, that's your job, right? Now, many people would know me. When I say they would know me as someone who's been a media skills coach to the White House. I have been rated the #1 speaker in the industry by the Securities Industry Association at the Wharton School of Business. I've had several television shows made about my work, but none of that would typically convey the thought that I began life as a stutterer. And for those of you with children, at 6 years old, I was unintelligible. If you said good morning to me, I'd be like, good, like take a chair, sit down, this is gonna take a minute. Now, I grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, where Mike Tyson grew up, and you could be a target there if you weren't different, let alone if you were. So I have to say that, for me, it became really important to master the art of communication. I don't think I'm a master, I'm still a student. But ultimately, if it wasn't for overcoming that challenge, I wouldn't be here with you right now.
Good overview.
You guys are so encouraging.
Right.
I'll take the encouragement.
Okay, so how do you define authentic communication, and why is it, or should it be, so important, specifically to female advisors?
Rather than get into a textbook definition, I'll give you an example. This one could be a little bit dicey. So, my first marriage, my wife and I probably should have stayed friends, but we had a baby, and we felt like, let's give it a try. Let's build a family. And she's still a dear friend to this very day. And I feel like I did ultimately win the lottery with my wife, Kelley. So I love her dearly, but I don't know, have any of you ever had the experience that I've had, where you literally walk into the house and no sooner does your spouse open their mouth than you're immediately angry? Have you had that experience before? Oh, come on, don't leave me hanging. Come on now. Come on, you know what I'm talking about, right? And that's the way it looks on the surface. That's the way that it looks. But if we slow things down, here's what we'll really see. What happens is I come in, my wife says something, it hurts my feelings, and then I get angry. If someone gets angry and their feelings weren't hurt, that's kind of weird, right? Yeah. Now, you would wonder, what's the difference? Well, what I typically say to men is, when that happened, did you say to your wife, hey, honey, that thing you said, it really hurt my feelings. Is that what you did? No, that's not what most guys do, right? What do? They get defensive. And the reality is it doesn't make for a very pleasant environment that evening. What I'm saying is that we often step over what's true and communicate out of a social veneer. It's not nearly as effective as the truth. that it's challenging to be authentic.
Which is the perfect segue to our next question about a challenging conversation. So how do you feel authentic communication applies specifically to challenging conversations as an advisor?
I believe that as advisors, I see people spending a lot of time, money, and energy to be around people with wealth. They go and join boards. They're involved in great efforts, great activities. But so many people have a fear of being perceived in those circles as that guy. And I do say guy specifically because that's the way that we say it, right? And most people, rather than create an ill effect on people, they would rather do nothing. So they have friends, family, social acquaintances, people, clients that they could ask for referrals, people who feel blessed by them, and yet we have a hard time actually asking. And that's something that I'm all about changing because I think that the first people we should serve are the people closest to us. I don't think that chasing down strangers is always such a good idea.
And again, so talking more about these practical examples. So how do you feel like you could talk to a friend or a family member or an acquaintance to get them to work with you?
Well, let me just ask, just by show of hands, because some people are really good at this, some of us are not, how many people do feel a bit awkward talking to friends and family about doing business? Let me just see a show of hands. So I think that's a lot of us, right? And so those of you who are great at it, that's awesome. God bless you. I'm not. So one of the first things that I would say if I was being truly authentic, not suggesting that I always am, is what I would say to a friend is, hey, can I have a conversation with you that may be a little bit awkward for me? You know, there's something I really would like to discuss with you, but it may be a bit uncomfortable. The good news is I will really look uncomfortable. This will be highly believable coming from me. Do you follow me? Right? Authentic communication is most important when people already know you because they know when you're not being you. And there's no gaming that system. And think about it this way. If you do pull one over on them, how good does that feel? Do you walk away feeling like that was a victory? Or do we walk away feeling like an imposter? I don't think that we win by not being authentic. That's just my personal opinion and experience.
And now kind of the flip side. How do you feel authentic and deal with a difficult conversation when a client wants to leave you?
So, you know, I was in a branch. I was meeting with an advisor. And, you know, he got a phone call. Clearly it was important because he stopped in the middle of our meeting to take the call. And I could see by the way his face looked how frustrated he was that it was not a good conversation. And I could tell that basically the client was leaving. So when I heard him, he was saying things like, you know, you got to understand, I understand the markets have been turbulent, but you got to have the long-term view. And after all, you know, I understand. And he hangs up. And I'm like, what was that? He says, well, one of my largest clients is thinking about leaving me. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Why did you tell them, you know, you got to understand, you know, you understand. It's like, if your wife said, I'm leaving you, would you be like, you got to understand, I understand things have been a little bit difficult. It's like, dude, why don't you tell that guy the truth? Why don't you say this hurts? Why don't you say, I thought it was going to be a bad day, I had no idea it would be this bad? Why don't you say, I would miss you if that happened? Why do we make it emotionally convenient for people to, like, leave us? It almost insinuates that we don't really care. And I think that most people in a hothead moment will place a call like that, but when we don't respond defensively and we don't try to rationally explain, often they come to their senses and realize, hey, maybe I'm taking something out on someone that has nothing to do with them, which is often the case.
Now thinking about another emotion that we have, how do you deal with potentially a lack of fairness issue? So you're giving a bunch of different COIs to someone, but you don't feel like you're getting anything in return.
So this is a major pet peeve of mine, I have to admit. How many people here would admit that you've given more referrals to COIs than you've ever gotten back? Let me see a show of hands. Come on, come on, come on. Like, seriously, right? And so I don't think any of us would think that that's fairness, right? That it's fair to be a taker, not a giver. But at the same point, we don't want to damage the relationship. So if you were like a COI, I might say, you know, Laurie, I really want to thank you for all the great work you've done. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I've got nothing but rave reviews about your work. I'm just a little confused because over that period of time, I couldn't help but notice you haven't referred me. I'm just wondering, did I do something wrong? Or is there something that you need that would make it possible for you to refer me? And sometimes people feel like, that's a little bit strong. I don't know that I would do that. Well, let me ask you a question. If someone's going to use you, why do you think they wouldn't use your clients? I think people are unfair. I don't think they're particularly judicious. I think they do that to everyone. So.
Now, what do you think is the most difficult or honest thing an advisor can tell a client? I'm throwing you tough ones here.
So there are many exercises and drills that we do. And this one would be one of the most challenging ones, surprisingly, because I do see advisors who lose sleep over their clients' finances, go to funerals, go to weddings, go out of their way, worry about people, service accounts that they're not really earning money from. I see every example in the world that shows that we care. And yet the one thing I rarely ever hear people say is looking someone in the eyes and saying to them, I care about you, and here's why. So the demonstration's there. I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning whether or not we can have that conversation. Because people are always wondering, what's your motive? And when you don't tell them what your motive is, they've got to import one. And that may not be the accurate motive. It might not be right.
Now let's think about our culture that we're facing, with all the different technologies that are out there. Do you think our culture, and in particular the female culture, is moving to a more or less authentic culture?
I do think that because communication skills are going down, like people are like always on their phone. I see people at dinner, like families, everybody's on their phone at the same time. I'm like, okay, I get it, but be nice to talk every now and then. I hear about people breaking up over text messaging, all sorts of things like that. I think that our communication skills are getting worse. And if you think about the fact that as a nation we have a 50% divorce rate, I would submit to you that at the heart of most divorce is communication. That it's an issue of misunderstanding. And I don't see it getting better in our current time. So I think it's even more important that we learn to communicate authentically.
Now, curveball question.
Yes.
Why did this all become so important to you? You obviously work with so many of the advisors here in the different firms. Why is this topic so important to you?
My dad, Reverend Benjamin Kelley. I'm a miniature version of him. He was a very big man in many ways. When he died, like 1,000 people came to his funeral. I'd say at least 200 of them were other ministers. And my dad would take a bullet for me. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget the day that he put his life on the line for my life. I was like 8 years old. But my dad could never say to me, I love you. Like he couldn't it just wasn't his thing, And I know they love me. Like I didn't question that, but I'd be lying to say I didn't want to hear the words. So I found myself really wanting to give other people access to that voice, whether it be handling clients, your team, your family. At the end of the day, a person's relationships is a direct reflection of their communication skills. It is communication that creates relatedness. And that's how we can improve relationship, is by improving communication skills.
I still think of that example from yesterday of the Mia and Nikki. It keeps resonating in my head of that communication that you have. So definitely important. Can you highlight any specific techniques advisors can implement immediately to start improving communication skills and building more meaningful client relationships?
Well, okay, so an immediate technique. This is over lunch, so let me make it a short, quick one. I'm going to ask you to engage in an exercise, a very simple exercise. You'll be able to keep eating. You just don't want to be chewing when I give you the exercise. I'd like you to notice, well, many of you notice this. If you ever talk to people, you see them, they're like, oh, it's so good to see you, it's so good to see you. You feel like they're looking for someone more important to talk to, right? And we've all had that experience. I'd like you to notice something in a moment. I'd like you to turn and look at another person and notice that you can only see one eye in focus. You cannot actually see both eyes in focus. The only way you won't be able to do this is if your eyes are moving back and forth very quickly. You'll swear you're looking right at them, but you're not. So just turn and look at another person. Just turn and look. You're doing great. You're doing really great. Yeah. Okay. So.
Look at that uproar. How are we going to get
Let me see if I can get you all back. I didn't know the toy was a part of this. Okay. So, how many of you can actually see that? Right? All right. Let's go on to the next question.
Okay. Now, next question. This one's a layup question. So, given the way the industry is trending, why do you think female advisors, of course, are in the best position as a financial advisor?
Well, I would say that one of the reasons that I believe that women do represent the future of the business. You know, when I started out in the industry, I was 23 years old, out of Brownsville, Brooklyn, working on Wall Street. You know, I was a gunslinger, I'll admit it, right? I was cold calling my first year in the early 80s. I did 400,000 in production my rookie year, which for a kid out of the ghettos was not bad, right, for a rookie year. I forgot the question. What was the question?
It was a long one.
Say
it's
it
all
again.
about
Say it
female empowerment.
Oh,
of
female.
course.
Oh, got it.
Can you highlight any specific
I'm
techniques for-
back. Okay. So, you know, look, I think the business in the 80s was very male. I don't make that wrong. It is whatever it was. But the moment we began to move away from products and more towards relationship, and it became less about performance and more about connecting, I think that's where being a gunslinger was no longer the skill. I think the skill became one of really being able to nurture long-term relationships, help people through some of the difficult challenges psychologically that go with money. And if I were placing my bet, I would place my bet on women. I'm biased. I have daughters, so I'm biased. I want to admit that. I have daughters, so I'm biased, you know.
Now, before we close out, we do have time for one or two audience questions if anyone wants to think of anything in particular. But is there anything you would want to share with the group to kind of get them thinking more about this authentic communication? What skills can they take back home, or advice you would give, maybe?
Well, one of the things I would say is that one of the reasons why for me it's an extreme honor to be here is because in the 80s, I think that there were not many women in the business, and it was not a very kind and gentle time. And for those of you who have been in the business for, 30, 20, 10 years, I know that you put up with a lot to get to where you are. I know you've overcome a lot. And I just want to say that I admire your courage and I admire your tenacity. And I think that it's worth it. I think that it's worth it to help people. And that's what you do.
Do we have any questions? No? Thank you all. I do want to just do a quick plug real quick. Feel free to stop by. Sarano does have a new book that came out, Weaponizing the Mega Team, The Rise of the COO. So if anyone's interested, feel free to stop by our FS Investment booth, and we look forward to continuing to partner with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very
and
much.
congratulations.
Take care all.